Give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Mr. President. We listened very carefully to our briefers, and we share the concerns voiced by the UN on the humanitarian crisis, which is unfolding in a number of regions in Ukraine. Our colleagues in Security Council are also rightfully pointing to it. But the difference here is that the assessments of some, in particular Western states, are based, in addition, above and beyond the situation with refugees, on the hyped-up campaign of lies and disinformations in Ukraine is reaching new heights, and it started at the very beginning at the special military operations. Today, we've heard a whole slew of such information from our colleagues. The accusation about the shelling of the infamous now maternity hospital in Mariupol and the shelling of the Mariupol theater, and the fact that Russia is not allowing refugees to leave, and that Russia shelled the mosque of Sultan Suleiman in Mariupol, and that Russia using automatic weapons to shoot a breadline in Chernigov. And this has been refuted many a time. The American colleague referred to the Director General of WHO, who allegedly said that Russia, 33 hospitals were bombed by Russia. I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that the Director General of WHO, and please ask him, did not say this. As far as we know, it is not within their rules to attribute who conducted a strike against a medical facility. Now, on the issue of the attribution, who is at fault when it comes to destroying medical facilities in Ukraine is something that we have many questions about, and we'll revert to that. Now, in Chernigov, the line in Chernigov, this has been refuted many a time ago. There are no Russian military in Chernigov. I think that this is the consequences of just distributing weapons to whoever wants to have them in Ukraine. During this time, in addition to other kinds of weaponry, 25,000 pieces of automatic weapons had been distributed to population at large. Now, the mosque, the Sultan Suleiman Mosque in Mariupol, the president of the fund of the mosque of Sultan Suleiman Mosque in Mariupol refuted the fact that the Turkish mosque with 80 people was shelled by Russia from the east. So I don't know who will end up in the Guinness Book of Records, but I do know who will hold the record on fakes voiced during one single meeting of Security Council. That will be a Guinness Book record. As I already said, a sort of symbol of the fabric manufacturing fakes by the Ukrainians and the Westerners are the situation in Mariupol and around this city. Well, let me explain to you why this place is special. In the course of events in 2014-2015, when the Ukrainians warmongers threw against those who were in disagreement with the Maidan authorities, those who lived in the east of the country, it threw planes and tanks against them. At that time, Mariupol, one was the main centers of resistance in the Donetsk People's Republic, and its citizens almost unanimously supported the independence of the republic during the referendum, and they were actively speaking out against the nationalist Kiev regime. And the Ukrainian Nazis cannot forget that, cannot forgive that. They drowned the city in blood, and they made it in a sort of headquarters and the mainstay of voluntary Nazi battalions, first and foremost the Azov Battalion and the Right Sector 1. The Mariupol airport had the infamous jail, which is also a torture center with all of the attributes belonging thereof. It had the ditches with bodies of people, solitary confinement cells, and chainsaws. This is not even the Middle Ages. This is neo-Nazism. And that is precisely why the Ukrainian radicals are clinging to this city so much. First of all, it covers up many a proof of their crimes. And second of all, they understand that they will have to be held accountable for those. And that's why they stand ready to drag into the to drag into the grave almost entire population of Mariupol. Exactly the way it was done by the Nazis in Berlin in 1945 when it was besieged. They also hold people as human shields. They do not allow them to evacuate, and they place right next to residential buildings heavy weaponry in violation of international humanitarian law. And this is something that our Western partners and unfortunately the Secretariat representatives is something they persistently do not want to see. But it's very difficult to cover up facts, and here we would like to point you to the ICRC statement, which sheds light on these facts. In such a situation, it's not a surprise that Mariupol has become almost a leader on the number and ingeniousness of the fakes, and their manufacturing has become almost a main job of the Ukrainian regime. And let me just dwell on the three most egregious of them. And the first one, of course, is the former maternity hospital in Mariupol, allegedly destroyed by the Russian missile. I'm not going to dwell on this too long. Let me just simply say that we covered this earlier, and this information is something that we put into a letter sent to the Secretary General. It is very difficult to find a rational explanation to the fact that our Western colleagues decided not only to notice a warning in advance, the warning we issued telling everyone that the Rodom had become a military firing post for the nationalists, they also ignored the irrefutable fact about the stage nature of the situation there along the lines of what was being done by the white helmets. And they also ignoring the opinion of ballistic experts who say nothing hit the building, but rather there was an explosion there. The second fake is something that we heard about today also from our Western colleagues. Russia allegedly hit the Mariupol theater, where more than 1,000 people had sought refuge. In actual fact, already on the 13th of March, there was widely available public information provided by private people in Mariupol who managed miraculously to escape the city. They were saying that Azov is holding in that building a huge number of people and is preparing a bloody provocation. We therefore are not surprised by the fact that in front of the building you can see the word children written down on soil. The Russian armed forces were informed about the situation, and the building of the theater was never considered as a target for a strike. But the fact that in such places of provocation, you can very frequently find Western reporters who briskly report on that. And this is something that's become a tragic hallmark of provocations in Ukraine, who are covering up the excesses conducted by nationalist battalions and Ukrainian armed forces. After the Western propaganda efforts to make sure that the mass media throughout the world show a picture of a person who had lost his wife because of the Ukrainian strike by Tochka-U with cluster ammunition against the center of Donetsk. And this is presented as something that had taken place in Kiev. After that, it's very difficult for us to ask you to be rational in your assessment. Once again, let me recall that neither one of you or Western mass media said anything about the tragedy in Donetsk, which resulted in 20 deaths of civilians. And the third fake, now, Russia allegedly is forcing the people from Mariupol and other Ukrainian towns into Russia. Therefore, only humanitarian corridors into Ukraine should be opened. This is a barefaced lie. Since the beginning of a special military operation, the hotline of the Ministry of Defense of Russia received more than 2.5 million requests for being evacuated into Russia. Unfortunately, we have to state that we have not been able to evacuate everyone yet, but this is because the Ukrainian authorities are prohibiting people from doing that. But during the previous 24 hours alone, from the finally opened up long-suffering Mariupol, we managed to ensure the evacuation of more than 31,000 civilians, including 89 foreign nationals, amongst whom 71 OSCE staff, 9 Greek nationals, and 9 Pakistani nationals. Out of the 31,000 evacuees, only 36 people moved to the Kiev-controlled territories in the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. The rest of them opted for Russia and in the areas of Zaporozhye and Kherson Oblast under the control of the Russian armed forces and categorically refused to move over to the territories under Kiev control. The whole humanitarian operation was conducted by the DNR forces and Russian armed forces without any participation from the Ukrainian side. I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that the car jam at the exit of Mariupol of people moving towards Berdyansk and Melitopol, freed from Ukrainian Nazis, is 10 kilometers long. Until Russian liberators entered the city, this is not something that was seen, and this is not a surprise because the peaceful civilians were needed by the Nazis as a human shield. And those who escaped from Mariupol are telling us about mass atrocities and crimes conducted by the territorial defense, but the abuses against the elderly, women and children. And all of these people are being individually provided with medical and psychological assistance. The situation in other areas varies. Yesterday, we have fully complied with the quiet guns regimes along the humanitarian corridors proposed by the Ukrainian side on the Kiev, Zaporozhye, Zhytomyr, Sumsk, Kharkovsk, and Poltav directions. And this has been many times confirmed by the means of objective control, including with the use of drones. On the humanitarian corridors opened towards Russia, neo-Nazis were not allowing people to go. They threatened them, and those who managed to break through were being shot at. Yesterday, in the Kharkov direction, once again, there was a column of buses full of refugees. They are moving along the humanitarian corridor towards Russia. It was being shelled. As a result, 4 people died and they're injured. But despite all of the difficulties and all of the impediments, during yesterday alone, without the participation of Kiev, we managed to evacuate from dangerous areas 12,440 people, out of them 2,242 children. Overall, since the beginning of a special military operation, already 271,000 people, out of them 58,000 children have been evacuated. They have crossed the border of Russia. And this includes 31,000 individual cars. And we stand ready to take even more. In the subjects of Russian Federation, we have more than 9.5 thousand points of temporary housing. In the liberated territories, we create all of the conditions to make sure that those who want to can accede to the humanitarian assistance, which remains in many places the only possible means of survival. The medicines, clothes, and foods which are received from international organizations, in particular from ICRC, is something that the mayors of Ukrainian cities resell to local entrepreneurs. These facts have been reliably established in Zhytomyr, in Ivano-Frankivsk, in Vinnytsia, in Rovno, in Lutsk, in Dubna, in Vladimir-Volynski, and in Lvov. Hostages, basically hostages of the territorial defense battalions are 6,910 of foreign nationals from 22 states. Also, crews of 70 foreign ships are blocked in the seaports of Ukraine because there's a very high danger of mines. And this was created by Kievan authorities in their internal waters and territorial sea. And this also is related to the possible provocations by the Ukrainian armed forces from the shore. We continue sending humanitarian assistance to the needy in Ukraine. Mariupol alone received more than 450 tons of food, medicines, and basic necessities. Overall, starting with the 2nd of March, our emergency services and the Ministry of Defense supply to various regions of Ukraine, including Donbass, supplied about 3,000 tons of humanitarian cargo, including construction materials. Another issue here is that in a number of cases, the local administrations are threatening punishment to those who receive Russian humanitarian assistance. And against this, basically every day we see information from Western capitals that they are providing Kiev with yet another cargo of all kinds of weaponry. Yesterday, Washington announced that this week Ukraine will receive from them defense assistance to the amount of $1 billion. You are fueling this conflict, pouring oil into it. It is already clear now what kind of tragedy resulted from simply distributing light weapons to anyone who wanted them without any control. I wonder whether the Western taxpayers know about the risks of this weaponry ending up with the terrorist groups in Europe, portable air defense weapons, for example. Do you understand how dangerous it is to fuel the situation in Ukraine, how dangerous it is for your own security? Everyone has heard about the drone which landed in Croatia. It was full of explosives. It was not noticed, even though it crossed over several countries from the western point in Ukraine to Zagreb. That's more than 700 kilometers. Mr. President, we note with regret Ukraine has always was a pawn in the geopolitical struggle against Russia and remains such a pawn still. Western politicians couldn't care less about the suffering of the people in Donbass, including women, children, and the elderly. If this were not the case, we would not be now dealing with a salacious uproar surrounding the draft of humanitarian resolutions on Ukraine. After its draft was developed by France and Mexico, it stopped being humanitarian immediately and became full of political formulas which have nothing to do with humanitarian issues. As we were clearly told, the Western countries didn't need this project without them at all. In order to end up with an anti-Russian product, they are ready to push it forward, not in the Security Council, but in the General Assembly, ignoring the fact that this kind of document will help humanitarians nothing. And that is why Russia put forward its own draft containing within it everything that the humanitarians need. It does not contain political assessments. And this is not the kinds of assessment that you can find in other humanitarian resolutions either. And we open this document for the co-sponsorship by all UN members. But we are being told that the humanitarian resolution submitted by Russia is not something that satisfies Western countries. And this shows the true goal of the sponsors of the first so-called humanitarian resolution of the Council. And that is true hypocrisy here. And cynicism. Another point of cynicism is that many colleagues from many delegations tell us about unprecedented pressure by Western partners that their arms are being twisted, including blackmail and threats. The United States and Albania has disseminated a letter in which members of the UN are appealed to refrain from sponsoring our resolution. We do understand how difficult it is for those countries to withstand this kind of onslaught. And therefore, we decided to, at this stage, not to ask for a vote on our draft, but we are not withdrawing the draft resolution. Instead, tomorrow morning, we will ask for an emergency meeting to discuss again the issue of U.S. biolaboratories in Ukraine using the new documents we obtained in the course of the special military operation. And right now, we are going to forward the letter on that to the Emirati presidency. I thank you.
أشكر ممثل
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for his statement, and I give